What's going on, guys? My name is Brandon, and welcome back to Audio Addiction, where you can find the latest album reviews. You can find our band interviews, and you can find live coverage of the concerts that we get. Going to a local show on Friday with Before the Streetlights and My Lonely Heart, Poeta. It's going to be a great show. It's out in Asbury, New Jersey, so if you are going to that, sick. Secondly, we're going to go see Hail the Sun the following week, which I'm really stoked on. So let me know in the comment section below if you are interested in me getting some video for that as well. So I'll definitely be on the lookout for that. But if you enjoy what we do, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Also, make sure to hit that like button as well. It really does go a long way. And thank you guys for your support. I'd like to give a shout out to Shirley over at Artery for sending me this record a little bit early and giving my thoughts on it and opinions on it. So, without further ado, we're going to be talking about Siamese's new record, Shameless. So this record comes out on June 6th, I believe, out of Artery Recordings. I'll leave a pre-order link in the description if you are interested in picking it up. But they're a Danish band that kind of has influence of like R&B, soul, a little pop here, definitely pop, and then some like definitely some like rock, almost like, I wouldn't say it's metalcore quite, but definitely I would say it's more rock, like alternative sort of stuff. But it's really solid. I really was really pumped to check it out based off of Tunnelvision. I know that they released another song, Ablaze. This was like those were the two singles I believe that they have released so far for this record. But really sounds great in my opinion. I really have enjoyed this album thoroughly, and I'm going to go through each track, give you my thoughts and opinions on each one of them, give you some pros and cons on the entire record, and then I'm going to give an overall rating just for all the songs. So the first track, like I mentioned, Ablaze, this was, I believe, the first single that they released. You can find it on you can find it on YouTube. I think it has like over a million, it has close to 1 million views, but this kind of combines what I was saying, like electronic elements, pop elements, soul, sort of R&B sort of stuff with like rock music. It has this really cool sort of synthy electronic intro. The instrumentations remind me a lot of Paris, another great band, if you haven't checked them out. But I like that it incorporated electronic elements throughout the entire track. I think that's a really cool little additive there. I definitely feel like vocally, I like what's going on. It definitely has a diverse vocal performance, and if it's definitely unique. He doesn't sound like any other vocalist that I can think of off the top of my head, but it definitely, is reminiscent of other bands as well, like I was saying, Paris. And there will be a lot of other bands on this record that I feel like you'll attribute their sound to, but I feel like if they ever went on tour together, that would be great. So I also feel like this is a really solid opener track. It kind of gives you a feel for what the record's gonna sound like, and just overall how the record's gonna go about. So we're gonna move into track number 2, which is Tunnelvision. This was the first single that I heard from them, but it's definitely one of my favorite tracks. It has a lot more energy than the previous track, Ablaze, in my opinion. The vocals have this very pop-esque feel to them, and it has more diversity, and I feel like more range than the prior track, Ablaze. I feel like the instrumentals have this sort of poppy, sort of groovy vibe to it, very reminiscent of like Issues, and it has that sort of R&B-esque vibe as well. So I feel like, to compare them to Issues would be a great starting point, because I feel like they definitely have that sort of like R&B core vibe to them. I definitely feel like this is catchy as hell. It's from start to finish. It's just a really solid song that will get you in the moving and grooving. I think it was definitely a good solid choice to choose as a single. So we're gonna move it into track number 3, which is One Night Thing. This one is another one of my favorites off the record. I'm really liking the cool intro with the electronics and the vocals as well. I feel like this is kind of like If Issues and Palisades had a baby, this is what it would sound like, kind of a thing. Like I said, it incorporates R&B, pop, soul vibes to it. You can kind of pick out those sort of things when you're listening to this album, especially this track. That's the sort of vibes that I got. I feel like the guitar riffs are definitely sick. They almost have this sort of um, jazz sort of vibe to it, very reminiscent of AJ, what he does in Issues, where they kind of add that sort of R&B flair to it. And just another really damn catchy song. I feel like the first three tracks have been really solid. Two of which have been my favorites. So I feel like they definitely have started it off very well. So we're gonna move into track number 4, which is Soul Chemicals. This one is another one of my favorite tracks. I just have a lot of favorites, man. But I'm just loving the elements they added into this track. I feel like it adds a lot of depth to it, especially layer wise. With all the electronic pieces, I feel like it adds a lot of diversity. It adds a lot of fullness to the track, but also adds a little bit of ambience throughout the record. And I think it really sounds great, particularly on this track. The chorus has this sort of huge sound, like I've been mentioning. I feel like with the electronics, they've kind of just added that sort of huge feeling to it, which I really enjoy. The chorus seems very Bring Me the Horizon esque, especially That's the Spirit sort of vibes in terms of that. So maybe more like hard rock kind of a stuff with like electronic elements. I feel like the vocalist has an interesting way in how he does the vocals, especially in this track. I feel like he definitely has some grit to his vocals, but also knows how to kind of clean it up and make it real like smooth and elegant and stuff like that. So really enjoyed that, and the little guitar solo here in it throughout the song was really nice and just added a little bit more flair to the track, which I really enjoy. So we're gonna move it into track number 5, which is Brother. I really like that cool sort of glitchy style intro. I think that's really solid. I definitely feel like it's taking from elements of pop and kind of like top 40s music, but it still has this great groove to it, which I enjoy. Liking the soft verses in comparison to like the more anthematic choruses. I feel like this is a solid track. But it's definitely not one of my favorites. Not to say that it's a bad track, it just wasn't getting me like the other tracks that I've been mentioning that are my favorites. It just has this sort of good vibe to it, but not great in my opinion. So we'll move into track number 6, which is My Turn. The intro, for some reason, reminds me a lot of a rock version of Kanye's Power. I have no idea. Maybe it's just like the sort of chant at the beginning. For some reason, when I was listening to that track, I was like, damn, that sounds a lot like a Kanye track. But nonetheless, it's a really solid track. I'm really liking the anthematic feels that it has to it, especially with the chanting parts. I feel like that kind of adds this sort of just overall, like, just anthem feeling to it. Really liking the cool sort of ambient full soundingness of this track. I feel like this track is more vocally led as opposed to instrumentally or electronically led. I feel like this one is just a little bit more of a deviation from, what the rest of the album sounds like. I feel like this track has the least dynamic and is probably my least favorite track off the record. It's again, like I mentioned with Brother, it's a solid track, but it just wasn't a track that I was like, man, this is a really solid track in my opinion. But it just wasn't pulling on me. It just wasn't something that I was like, oh yeah, this is cool. I will say that in comparison to Brother, I would say that this one is way more diverse and has a little bit more experimentalness to it as opposed to Brother. So I would say if I had to give it to any track, I would say My Turn has the most experimental sort of feelings to it. So in that regard, I feel like that's solid. So we're going to move it into track number 7, which is The Promise. This one is one of my favorite tracks off the entire record. I like how it starts off slow and just builds. I feel like that's always a solid trope of this style of music. Just the building up to the bigger parts almost is reminiscent of like EDM. A lot of that EDM sort of stuff does that slow build, which is really solid. I think the chorus definitely has this huge sounding vibe to it as well. I think this one just has really great tunes. Like honestly, it just has great instrumentals, and just makes you want to like get in and just enjoy it. It has just this catchiness to it that really ropes you in, like I was saying. They had this really cool kind of guitar solo. I definitely feel like it grooves really hard. They use, I think, a vocator, which is basically like you can talk and you can do like guitar solos or whatever chords or something like that, and it sounds like a voice. And they did a really great job of that. It sounds really awesome. And I definitely like the more R&B aesthetic of this track. I think this one is one of my favorites just because of that solo. I think it just really got me. And I feel like for a lot of people, this solo will get a lot of people, especially if you're a guitar player. I feel like that's just something that you don't hear too often. So in that regard, really enjoyed that track. So we're gonna move into track number 8, which is "Make It Out." Another one of my favorite tracks. This one's a bit of a slower one. It feels very much like top 40s pop influence, without a doubt. But nonetheless, I really enjoy it. Vocally, I like the vocals and the piano intro. I think it's, again, a really solid sort of thing. And then after that sort of intro slash first verse, it kind of picks up after that. And then the chorus is super catchy. Very much, I could very much see this on the radio. Maybe not like, you know, maybe not like a big radio station, but I can definitely hear it being on the radio, especially with that sort of top 40 sort of pop influence to it. I feel like some people will definitely dig this for sure. I'm really liking the addition of falsettos, and I would say that this track is probably the most vocally diverse and just great track overall. I feel like he definitely experimented a lot with his vocals and his range, and you can definitely tell on that. I feel like the dynamics of this track has this just highs and lows, but it just makes it for an interesting listen. I would say this one's probably the most interesting track, up with "My Turn," but I feel like they executed this one way better. It just has that, again, pop aesthetic, but also, very much like that rock sort of like R&B flavor to it. Again, very much attributing it to Issues, but I would say this track is like an Issues track, but without screaming. So really enjoy this track a lot. I would say that, again, it's in my top tier of my favorites off this record. So we're gonna move into track number 9, which is "Cities." Really liking that cool intro. I think it's definitely sort of off sync because when you hear like the chanting parts at the beginning and then you hear the drum parts, and then just like the guitar parts, it's a little bit off, but it definitely sounds really cool. It has this unique sort of sound to it. This one has more, I would say, like hard rock and pop and R. I would say more R&B than pop, but definitely has a little bit of pop influence as well. I would probably say that this is one of the heaviest tracks off their record. The breakdown at around the 3 minutes and 55-second mark just goes in, which I really enjoy. I think the layering is great on this track, and then just the vibes on this track are go just have these hard vibes to it that will really get you pumped for this track. And I would say also this is up with the most experimental tracks off the record. It just has this sort of really cool chant at the beginning, and I feel like it carries throughout. And it's just a really solid track. I think it definitely took me a little bit of getting used to at the beginning. That chant just seems a little bit off, and it kind of got me a little bit flustered a little bit because it just so a little bit off sync. It's just off sync enough to be a little bit odd, but I think it definitely works in that regard. I think after multiple listens I started to be like, oh, this sounds really cool. So I would say if you have listened to this track, I would give it a few more listens if you didn't like it initially. I feel like it's kind of a grower track, and I would definitely say it's not one of my hated tracks off the record, but I definitely say it's not quite in my favorites yet. So we're gonna move into track number 10, the last track, which is "Never Be the Same Again." Again, this one has this sort of Paris vibes to it as well. I'm really liking the vocals on this track as well. I think it's just a really solid track, and I think vocally it's a really interesting track vocally. So really solid there. I love the layering paired with the drums and just all the other instrumentals. I think they just match up very well in this track, particularly. And I definitely feel like the electronics make this track. If you just took that out of the equation, I feel like it wouldn't be as good, in my opinion. I feel like the electronics definitely nail it home in terms of this track, and I definitely feel like it's a great closer track to close out the record with. So my pros and cons on this entire record, I really like the aesthetic of top 40 slash pop slash, R&B and soul sort of vibes. I know that that's becoming kind of a newer thing. Obviously with Issues doing it and a lot of other bands. I know Johnny Craig has been doing that for a while. So in that regard, I don't think it's nothing new, but in this regard, I feel like they just meshed a lot of different genres together, with sort of rock and like hard rock sort of vibes to it. And I feel like they definitely came out with a really solid record, very reminiscent of Issues Headspace, in my opinion. Maybe not as heavy, but definitely in that sort of same vein. But overall, for not knowing about this band prior to doing this review, I really enjoyed it. I think it's a solid album from start to finish. If you do like those sort of pop aesthetic, pop, top 40 sort of aesthetic, I feel like you'll definitely get into this. There's no screaming. It's mainly just sort of rock music. So, I feel like if you're more attributed to rock, but you do listen to top 40s, I feel like you'll like this record a lot. And for people who, maybe this might not be for them, I definitely feel like you should give it a chance. It really grew on me for sure. I listen to a lot of heavy bands too, and I definitely can see myself listening to this and finding a place for it in just my musical rotation. So, in that regard, I think it's really awesome. I also feel like it's really diverse in terms of just each song doesn't sound the same, and it sounds really great. So, some weren't my favorite, and I think that that's okay. You know what I mean? That's totally fine. On certain songs I could see eye to eye with them, and others I couldn't. So I think that's what the beauty is of having an album. Not everybody's gonna like every track of the entire record, but there's gonna be somebody who likes the tracks that I didn't like. So, in that regard, I definitely feel like you should check it out. My overall rating for Siamese's Shameless record, I'm going to be giving it a 9.3 out of 10. It's definitely one of the stronger albums of this year. And if you get the chance to pre-order it, definitely do so. I'm sure they would appreciate it. I know they're trying to break into the American market, and I definitely feel with this sort of record, they will. Again, I think it's a really solid record. It's just one that you can just put in your car, just jam, and just listen to. So let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on Siamese. Have you heard of them? Obviously, they're new to Artery, so if you haven't, then definitely check them out. If you have been a fan for a while, let me know if they've had previous records, and if they have had previous records, do they kind of sound the same as this one, or did they definitely go in a different direction? I'd certainly like to know. I do want to check out their older stuff, without a doubt. So if you are a fan of them, definitely let me know in the comments. So if you enjoy what we do, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Also, make sure to hit that like button as well. And if you enjoy us a lot, we have a merch store where you can pick up Audio Addiction merch. That'd be greatly appreciated. We have some big news in the works, so we're excited to share it with you in the future. So my name is Brandon, and we hope you got your fix, and we'll be talking with you soon. Peace. Hey guys, hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. Of course, if you enjoy what we do, make sure to go check out the other series we do. We do album reviews, we do band interviews, and we do live videos, so definitely go check that out. Hit that subscribe button. It really helps our channel, helps us grow. Make sure to hit that like button as well. Go follow us on social media. That's all down below. We try to keep that as updated as possible. We also made a new website where we'll be posting photos of upcoming concerts and stuff like that, which you can go check out at audioaddictionmedia.com, and come get your fix with us, guys. Talk to you later. Deuces.